What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Axioms on Trial. I've had one hell of a week, so I'm happy to be back on here. This is like therapy for me. So, and I know Cease is probably in the same boat with it in general. So, how you doing, bud? What's new? What's going on, man?
Not so much. Just trying to finish school by, I think, December. I should be done. So pretty much all my time is going to that right now.
Oh,
so it's
completely
a lot of stress, but
yeah,
I'm almost there. I can see the finish line. So I'm excited to. It's been a little while since we've been able to sit down and do this.
Yeah, but, we've tried to get together. We've had some things go on. I was gonna say we I think we've had 3 that we were supposed to do, but at this point, given my situation that's going on, I'm having a lot more time to focus in. So we're actually going to have a narration video out on presuppositionalism and transcendental arguments this Saturday. I'm still working on the time it's tenable. I was hoping for 5 p.m., somewhere around 5 to 8 p.m. for Matt Slick in that time frame on Saturday, October 3rd. So, and that's Eastern time. So if you guys can make it out for that, that'll be interesting. That'll be Cease one-on-one with Matt Slick. But let's not waste any time. Let's just go straight into it. Our guest tonight, I'm sure a lot of you already know him, is Spartan Theology. He runs a channel, Spartan Theology. You can actually check it out in the description in this video. It should be there if you want to check out his channel and go subscribe to it. How you doing, brother?
Doing pretty good. I don't know why I didn't fix my camera the whole 20 minutes we were waiting before, but
yeah, all of us are having some issues, but we're okay.
Always.
Yeah, yesterday I got into a horrible accident. I'm just happy to be here. So let's just, all technical difficulties aside, it's good.
We're alive.
We're alive, and we're going to talk about what happens after you die, apparently. No, I'm just kidding. Tonight we're going to talk about the problem of evil and then some other topics. So it won't just be the problem of evil, as the title suggests. That'll probably be what starts it off. I know Spartan said he's got some questions for us. How would you guys want to start kicking this off? Who wants to get the ball rolling?
I mean, I guess the best way to start would be what is the problem of evil? Because I mean, there's that seems like a very broad term.
Sure.
So, I mean, I could even start off too, the way I would say, or the way I think of the problem of evil. So, I think, obviously it could be very broad or it could be specific, but, a broad definition would just be, the fact that there's evil in the world leads very strong evidence that there is no good God in control of everything. Would you agree that that's pretty decent description?
I would say that the problem depends on how you define God. If God is supposed to be all-powerful and all-loving, that's where the tension lies. Because
exactly.
I don't see how, given the state of the world, both of those things can be true. I think there's still a way to believe in God, but I don't think you can have it both ways, where he's all-powerful and all-loving. I think that would be my position on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same. The omnipotence or benevolence and omniscience is is what kind of hinges on it for me. I already have kind of my own problems with the omnis in general. It's a different topic to go into, but sure. But yes, it will given the criterion. It's if that's the case, that's kind of what rises the problem with the introduction of evil in the world.
Well, not any evil, right? You don't think just the fact that there's evil would lead is a problem. I mean, some evil is fine. Obviously, if you stub your toe, but every time you stub your toe, you get $1 million. That'd be a pretty good world. That doesn't seem like that would be a problem of evil.
No. Just certain type of violence where, and I think
that's the best way to think about it.
I mean, one thing is saying, okay, we need suffering in the world because suffering builds character, and it's actually something that ultimately can be a positive. I mean, I'm not against suffering in general, but it's suffering where it doesn't lead you to growth. It only leads you to, remain in suffering. And the attempts by the religious to answer the problem of evil, I think, have been completely unsuccessful and unconvincing. But yeah, we can get into that.
No, I pretty much agree with you for sure. Like I think a lot of responses to the problem of evil are just ridiculous, kind of, but
Yeah.
bad. Like, yeah, I don't agree with a lot of them.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I mean, do you so like, would you have your own like theodicy that you look into?
I think the problem of evil, like at this point in my thinking, like I think the problem of evil gives some evidence towards naturalism or atheism or whatever you want to call it. I just think there's more evidence the other way. Just like, I mean, there can be evidence pointing both sides of an argument or whatever, but one is just stronger.
Okay.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I think
and
the problem of evil, like the evidential problem of evil, pretty much works. I just don't think it's like convincing.
sure. Would you take like the free will or anything like that as one?
I don't think like free will is really like because I think like we could talk about like if we want to like go over them so people kind of like know what we're talking about too. So I would be fine with like going through a bunch of different theodicies or whatever, like soul building, like Cease was talking about. Like,
I was gonna ask you about that towards the end for sure and get your opinion on that. But yeah,
but
definitely.
I'm just like curious because I think the biggest like does gratuitous like because I think what we're talking about is gratuitous evil, right? Like evil with no no compensating benefit and not even just compensating or whatever, because
longer than that might be necessary. But there's also, for me, it's not just the evil committed by humans, but natural evils. We can't really the tectonic plates or hurricanes ripping babies from mothers' arms and things like that is
cancer in children.
Those kind of things where, and when you say like the stub the toe thing, is like I've heard like guys like Inspiring Philosophy, they kind of use you can't have the good without the evil kind of, or the evil without the good kind of a thing, and that it's almost like when you work out, you're suffering to get better in that sense. But I think I would put the gratuitous there, where it's like there would be no need if this was, say, we take the soul building theodicy to build us up in some way, because I don't think that those are necessary in any way.
Well,
you could.
Yeah, I think it can. I think soul building can get really bad too. Actually, if you take it too far, because then it's like the Holocaust is like a good thing, because it like built souls. But like that's ridiculous. Like that's, if your theodicy leads to you thinking the Holocaust was a positive thing, then obviously there's a problem.
Well, Mike, you know how I feel about Inspiring Philosophy. I think that channel is awful. Look,
I like some of his Bible stuff, but I don't know about his philosophy really. I don't like idealism, so I don't really.
I was gonna say the problem is that, well, first of all, free will is a complete non-starter, because aside from the fact that you can defend that position philosophically in a way that I think is successful, it's also inconsistent with what we see in the Bible, because it's, even if we were to assume free will exists, whose free will? I mean, the victim suffering, the cancer, suffering a rape, their free will is not being cared for. It's the free will of who the person doing the immoral act that matters. And as far as the idea that you need the bad with the good, well, apparently not, because the whole idea is that in heaven there's only the good and there's no, the bad isn't there. So it's just a special pleading there. It's not the case. The Bible tells us that it's not the case, that you can't have one without the other. And it just, and the thing that bothers me when people attempt that type of argument or that type of response is that when God in the Old Testament sees that he's not being worshipped the way that he wants, he intervenes in the world. And so why? So he only cares. So when we see evil and things that we are clearly needless suffering, the response is, well, God is giving us free will and letting us choose. Until he doesn't do that in all the places in the Old Testament where he intervenes and takes it away. So what is it? Does he care about free will, or does he not care? Or does he only care when it involves him in specific, and the rest of the time he's fine just watching by? In any other context, if any of us were put in a situation where we could stop evil from happening, we would be morally, we would have the moral responsibility to step in and do something about it. Yet, in the context of God, it's okay because he's God. I mean, that's ultimately that's what it ends up being. It's anything is good if God does it, because I've defined good that way, and it's completely circular. It's not giving any real, it just, I think, undermining.
Do you think that I was going to ask you guys on this, and I'll bow out and give you guys a conversation so that way it's not convoluted, but do you think that kind of invokes the heart of the Euthyphro dilemma in this,
we
or
just got to the Euthyphro dilemma?
but if you guys want, we can
and I don't
guys
really
can,
want to have a debate on the Euthyphro.
yeah, I was like, if you want, we can if we can save that for another time, if that's not something we want to get into. But yeah, I'm gonna give you guys the floor on this for a little bit. That's I know fine. Spartan will come in and have a conversation maybe biblically about it or about something else. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear you guys on this, and I'll shut up now.
Yeah, I guess you kind of said a lot, so we kind of if you want to start from the beginning of what you said, because I definitely don't I wasn't taking notes or anything, which I probably should.
Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, you can kind of start from the beginning, and I can I'll jump in because I did have plenty of things I wanted to respond to. But
I was saying that I don't think free will answers the problem. And again, I think when we read the Bible, this God's concern with free will is completely inconsistent, because he intervenes in the world when he sees it fit. When people are not worshiping him.
Let me, the way you start describing. So, if we want to say free will just isn't an option, because that's how you started off. You basically said, well, free will just isn't even an option from the start because philosophically you believe that it just can't exist. Correct?
Well, I would never say, I don't say anything with absolute certainty.
Yeah, but do you see a contradiction in the idea of free will?
It doesn't make, I don't see any context in which it makes sense. I don't see, not only do I not see evidence for free will, but even when people say that we have the illusion of free will, I think when we examine our day-to-day experience closely, what is it like to actually be a conscious being acting upon the world, and not just reacting, I think it's not that hard to start to discover that this feeling that we're making a free choice is not really even there. I think it's just people that are not thinking about it closely enough. I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I'll give you an example. If I ask you to think of a city, or the name of a city, whatever name comes to your mind, you didn't freely choose it. It pops into consciousness as just the idea came to you. But all of that is
I could pick a different one.
Sure, but
after
whatever came, and even you deciding, okay, I'm not going to pick that one, I'm going to pick another one. All of that is based on sort of neurological events that you're not the author of.
Yeah, I just feel this gets to the point. I'm this is above. You could be right. To be honest, whatever. This is something I don't know about philosophy of mind and neuroscience and stuff. So
right.
you could be right for all I know, to be honest. But I don't
Yeah,
think you are.
I don't want to
but-
be right.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to say, hey, there is where the free will lies. If there's anything that I had wishful thinking towards, is the idea that I want free will to be true, but I've seen no argument or evidence for it that's been successful in any way. But the thing is,
To me,
even
it just seems like I just want to like the idea is like even if there was like philosophical arguments that told me my chair doesn't exist, like I'm still gonna believe that my chair exists. I mean, I'm sitting on
Right.
it, and that's how I feel about free will. And I mean, I could be wrong, but it seems so obvious to me that like I do have some choices, so it seems ridiculous to think otherwise. But I mean,
I have the opposite intuition with
yeah,
that. But,
yeah,
but the
that's
thing
an
is,
interesting
even
intuition. Yeah,
the thing is, even if we were to just pretend that there isn't a problem and then just assume that free will exists, you're still left with the fact that, you know, it's still the problem of evil remains because
oh yeah, I don't think free will is a good like solves the problem of evil or anything.
I don't think it
That's
does
why.
either.
Yeah, I don't think it does because
So-
it doesn't. I think a good like obvious like I think the problem of evil like related to animal suffering, like we all can agree that animals don't have free will and didn't like morally deserve to suffer, and they do, like especially if you believe in evolution. I think like the problem of evil because of evolution and animal suffering is like I mean billions of years of animals dying seems like a
Right.
pretty unlikely way. Like that's to me the strongest version of the problem of evil.
So you said that you had a number of questions you wanted to ask.
Yeah, okay. So we already went over obviously what the problem of evil was, but like why do you personally, like as an atheist, think why do you care about the problem of evil, or like why do you
Well,
even think about it?
Well, because I care about the well-being of the world, and I think
So
we
you do think evil exists because you
oh
are more
certainly.
of a realist.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on your show
Yeah.
before. I am a more realist. I do think that you can discover objective moral truth in the context of phenomenology, psychology, neuroscience.
But that we're just kind of talking about like why you care about evil. Like obviously you care about evil because you don't want things to suffer. I mean that's because you're not a psychopath or whatever.
Exactly.
But why do you like care about like the actual argument against Christianity or theism in general or whatever? Like why? Like
Well,
I think
because
a lot of atheists misunderstand it, and I bet I'm sure you do understand it. But I think it could like people would enjoy to like hear your thought process about like how you think about like why you use this argument.
well, I care about it because when I hear a Christian say God is perfect and God is love and God is all powerful, he can do anything. It's like those attributes don't reflect what we see in the world. And aside from the fact that even if you were to take the Bible literally, which I think is impossible if you care at all about science, but this idea that we're all born sinful because of somebody else's actions. So it's okay that a child gets cancer because Adam and Eve did what they did, and
Yeah, I don't
so
believe
we're
that.
all
I don't
born
think
in
the
sin.
Bible says that, but
But a lot of Christians interpret it that way and justify it that way, saying none of us are innocent. None of us are innocent. Therefore, we sort of made our own coffins in a sense. Like we kind of deserve hell, we deserve suffering, and God in His grace gives us an out, even though He just wouldn't need to do that. Like He can do whatever, right? Instead, He goes into this completely unnecessary sacrifice to create a loophole in his system that he has created himself.
I mean,
it's
yeah,
so
that's asserting a lot. I don't want to get. I mean, if you want to get into that, I would love to for sure. But you can't just like explain the atonement in 2 sentences or whatever.
right. But the reason why I think the problem matters, or why I talk about it, is because I find Christianity inconsistent in the claims that it makes. I mean, if you want to say that God exists, but God doesn't care, and he's just sort of observing, then it would make sense that we see what we see. But if you want to say that he cares, and that all the suffering we're going through now is going to be okay later on down the line, that I think it's just a lack of empathy and a lack of valuing this life. So I care about it because I
I
value
think he
this life.
valued this. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to I'm not gonna like preach the gospel or whatever, but like, I think he valued the suffering so much and it hurt him so much that he was willing to make himself a human and take on all this suffering, and like suffer alongside us. And I think that's like the most wonderful thing that's ever happened. But like I said, we don't need to. That's what I'm saying. We could take this one step at a time or whatever, and like go through like what you think Scripture says and like where I disagree, or we can. Yeah, there's a number of ways we can do it.
I mean, the scriptural aspect of it, I think Mike is better suited for, because for me, it's like, I can read a number of different interpretations of these things.
Yeah, it just kills me when you say things like the Bible says or whatever. Like, I don't think the Bible is like one book or whatever. I think you can probably draw a number of views from the Bible, but it's like what makes best sense overall of the entire, and what we see in Jesus. I don't believe in inerrancy or anything like that. So I think we look to Christ more than better over the Bible.
So I try to say that not so much the Bible says, but Christians say.
Yeah, and I mean that's fair. That's fair, because then we could like, and if you want to go through like what some common Christian arguments, I'd be more than happy to do that too, because I think a lot of them I could probably agree with you on a lot of points and clear up a few points that you probably I would assume maybe you have some misunderstandings, maybe not. Maybe there's better ways people could say it or something, because a lot of people don't present the arguments very well, but.
In the context of the Bible, I have very few personal beliefs, because I can read the Bible and recognize that you can get a number of different interpretations. Now, there are certain things like, slavery in the Bible, that, yes, I'm aware of the kind of moves that Christians try to make to sort of say, well, it's not really slavery, it's servitude for people that owe debts and things like that. To me, that doesn't resolve the problem. Debt or no debt, it's wrong to own people. And the fact is that kind of society was wrong to function that way. And you would expect from a God who sees slavery as a moral evil. I mean, he's God. He can say this is wrong the way that he says this is wrong about other things. Instead, we don't find that in the Bible. Or where we find it, there are parts where we find it and there are parts where we don't find it. So we get both sides of that. So yeah, I would answer your question by just saying I care about it, because I think this depiction of God from Christians is inconsistent with the reality that we live in.
Yeah, I think something that like the one point I guess I would get across like atheists who I talk to and like that use this argument, like it's mostly like I think what you're basically saying, it's an internal critique of Christianity. So like you're not trying to say that like you believe in, and maybe you are. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, so are you more saying you believe that the world is evil, therefore God more than likely doesn't? I don't think you think it's like a deductive argument where like God can't exist, right?
No.
Or do you?
No, I
because there could be an evil God or whatever.
So I think again it depends entirely of how you're defining God. To me, I don't even get to that point, because the conversation for me ends way earlier, where it's like, evil or no evil, what is your evidence for God? I've never run into any argument that's even remotely convincing of why there's good reasons to believe in such a thing, so I don't. I think now, if someone comes to me and says, I know there is a God, I know God is good, and I know God is all powerful, well, then that's where I bring up the problem of evil. Mm-hmm. And well, how can you say these things when this is what we observe in the world? It doesn't, and the answers are never satisfying.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, I guess, like, I basically agree with you. I just think that there are reasons to believe in God, but I think the argument basically works But yeah, so that's what I'm trying to say. So like some Christians would say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm like thinking a million things going through my head. Sorry. So would you want to? Yeah, that's. Would you want to go through like an object or a response a Christian might say, like soul building, like the fact that there has to be evil in the world. That's how we get qualities like bravery and resilience and strength. It's like going to the gym. You have to like hurt yourself. And I guess we kind of touched on this before. I'm like a little confused if we talked about this before we went live or after, but I think it was actually after, so we don't have to touch on it again. But yeah, I'm just trying to think because, like I said, I basically agree with you that the argument kind of works. I just don't think it's convincing to me that like God doesn't exist, but I think it's evidence that against the claim that God exists.
Yeah, I think suffering is necessary, but I think it depends on the kind of suffering. I think going through certain struggles can build character, can build strength, can teach you how to live life more successfully, can make you stronger. So I wouldn't say that just suffering in general is the problem. But there's certain type of suffering where there are people who never get a chance to, who never overcome those things, who are destroyed by those things. And what is a 2-year-old who dies of leukemia learning from having their life cut down? What is the damage it does to the families? And yes, people can get past that, can survive that, but I don't think that is a type of pain that is usually constructive. There are so many examples that we can look at where it's a type of suffering that nothing was built upon. And
yeah, I would say one thing when people start bringing up like this though that I kind of object to, it's a very like individualistic view of things to me. Like, yeah, the child dying, like maybe like obviously like that's. I mean, I'm not arguing that that's not suffering. It's just something that comes through my head. Like I don't think this like solves a problem or anything. Like there's no, but it seems like when you mention that, like it's like this child like clearly had no effect, like didn't have any chance or whatever. It died when it was like 1 year old or even like a miscarriage or whatever. We don't even have to get into that because that's, or it would say it died when it was 6 months old, a baby. Like clearly that baby didn't have free will or like there's no soul building involved. Like it wasn't brave because it survived like a couple extra days. But that child dying could have like this ripple effect on the whole entire world. Like maybe that baby dying saved 10,000 people's lives or whatever because the father like ended up like working harder at work to like because he was whatever, you know what I mean, like the butterfly effect. I'm just curious like what you think about that. I don't know, it's kind of just came to my head now. Like I've obviously thought about it a little bit, but
yeah,
I have any thoughts.
Well, I don't see how. I don't find it convincing how something like that could result in all this positive thing in the world. I mean, especially in the context of like a rape or something. A rape that destroys the person's life and they're traumatized and they can they end up getting a drug problem and
yeah, but like say, I mean, I'm just like what if because that person got a drug problem, they weren't driving on the road one day when they would have, and the one day they were driving on the road like killed 500,000 people or something, like some ridiculous way.
Okay, but all of those things, if God is all powerful, none of them had to happen. So he could have prevented any of those things from taking place. And again, Christians would have an easier time making that kind of argument. That God just lets everything play out. If it wasn't the case that we don't see that in the Bible, we see God intervening. So why is it that he's intervening in one context and then caring about letting us do whatever in another? It's like he's picking and choosing.
I'm not trying to use that argument at all. I'm just kind of for sure. But you're like the way you're saying. So this is what I'm saying. You get into scripture and I struggle because you're like, oh, why is he doing this or whatever? And I'm like wondering, I don't know. I think understand why does God do something? Like that's a theological question. And I think theology gets super complicated super fast. So like to argue based on just like a simple like a surface level understanding seems, I don't know. I like to, the theology is like my thing or whatever. So I don't like you know what I mean. Like if someone was arguing philosophy of morality, and like you clearly knew that they had only read like one book, right? Like you would tell that person like you don't know what you're talking about, and you probably wouldn't trust anything they're saying. And not that I don't trust what you're saying, and I think that's why like and we can obviously branch out into different like different things. Like I'm talking philosophy now, and I'm no philosopher. I think it's very profitable to talk about different things, but to like make a claim that like, oh, I know what the Bible says, but like haven't really read any scholarship on the topic, or maybe you have. I don't know.
Oh no, I have. I have
Yeah.
for quite a while. Well,
So
I mean,
I'd love
again,
to
it
get into like
depends.
specific claims then about Scripture, if that's what we wanted to do.
It's up to you. It's up to you.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't
Because you're
think.
saying like that's fine. Then you're saying like why does God intervene in the Old Testament, but then like leave us alone after that or whatever?
So,
And I'm curious like
right.
if there's specific like things you're thinking about when you say that. Like what do
Yeah,
you mean
I
like
mean,
intervening or something? Like are you talking about like the flood or something? Or are you talking about like the conquest or something like giving the law? I don't know. I'm just
well,
curious what like you're.
all of that. I mean, all of that. I mean, the flood certainly is one. The whole, parable where he sends bears to
Yeah,
maul.
that's a
Right?
weird one. I don't know
You
too
know,
much about that one.
I mean, that's one example. The warnings that he sends. You know, I'm blanking on the specific name here. I think Mike would be better suited, but
Yeah, it's
there are
fine. He
many
wants to jump in too. Yeah.
there are many warnings that he sends those who he thinks are living, are worshiping multiple gods, and in the Old Testament he's pissed about that. Now, if you want to say that my interpretation of those events is incorrect, I mean, feel free to explain to me what the correct interpretation of the scriptures, is. But there are certain things that seem to me to not necessarily be metaphorical. It's like, no, this is what happened. This is the story. This is how God dealt with this particular situation. And so it's inconsistent with then a view of God that just lets us be, and then whatever we go through will be somehow amended in the afterlife. And again, to me,
Yeah.
it's
See, I don't believe
devaluing
in
of the
that.
life.
So I
Okay.
would like, but the most thing I would take issue with is like the way you say it, like that God that just lets us be and then makes it all good in the afterlife. Because you're right. If that's a Christian's argument, I don't think it works. And I've heard Trent Doherty, who's a Christian philosopher. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was talking about like the problem of evil in a conversation, and he like would agree that that doesn't really work. Like he brought up this thing like if Bill Gates like ran up to you and like smacked you in the head with a baseball bat, but then like gave you $20 million, like you'd probably accept it, right? You'd probably say that's enough money, like it was probably worth it, right? I mean, if you're
I
not
mean, it would
dead.
depend on what damage he did.
Yeah, but
Right.
like just imagine it just like really hurt and put a knot on your head. But he's still a jerk for doing that, right? Like you wouldn't be. He might be justified. You might be like willing to accept the payment,
But it
but
would still be
he's
an
yeah, it's
asshole
still
move.
an immoral action for him to do. So
Right.
like that's like the whole idea, like with God, like if he only just it's only like uh I don't know why I'm like blanking on the word, but like only compensation, then it doesn't really that doesn't really work. That's not a
So
good
what
argument.
is your approach to sort of resolve the problem? What is
I
your
just
answer?
like I look to Christ and the fact that Jesus came and suffered with us as like the only thing that I can look to. Like I agree that there is like a huge issue, and like I don't see any way out of it except for the gospel. And I think that's like the only, and that's what I'm saying. Like I think the problem of evil is like essentially why one of the reasons like why I believe in Christianity, because like I think the story of God coming down and suffering alongside us to free us from this problem is what answers it for me. But I mean, I would, if you don't believe in the Christianity, then obviously that is really not going to work. Like
No,
you're
but even
basically a
if
priori.
even if I was to believe those events happened, I don't see how that resolves it. What does him suffering along with us? when he could stop the suffering, how does that resolve the problem? He could make it so needless
Yeah, I don't
suffering
think it
wouldn't.
necessarily resolves the problem. That's what I'm saying. Like, I
Oh,
still
okay.
think there. I'm just as befuddled as you are, but I just like see. I don't see that it doesn't like lead me to not believe in God, but I definitely still think the issue stands. Or I just don't like it's. I'm not
Right.
like I don't know. Like I think that's a huge question. I definitely think as an atheist, that's your best argument by a mile.
Right?
Yeah. Are you in here for a second?
I
You're
don't.
muted, Mike.
We can't hear you. Wait,
Yeah,
it says
we can't hear
you're
you.
unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, StreamYard. But whatever. Yeah, I think we like actually did hit some pretty good ground there though. You might have to back out and come back in. It just happens sometimes then. But I definitely like think we touched on some good ground. Like I said, I'm learning like as far as the problem of evil, it's something I'm trying to learn about. I haven't been like actually reading on the philosophy too much recently, so that's why
How about now?
Oh, it's
Yeah,
good now.
we can hear you now.
Yeah. What did you
All
think
right,
about
sorry
our
about that.
conversation? As I'm assuming you were.
No, I think that was really. I thought that was good. I just wanted to broaden it, kind of ask you, in like the omnibenevolent or omniscient sense. Like, do you take those omnis?
I don't think I believe in like classical theism, if that's what you're asking. Like I do think like I don't know exactly. There's like different models of God or whatever, which is what you're kind of getting at.
Well, if I asked you like if you thought, well, I mean, would you say he's all good?
Yeah. I mean, I do believe in omni attributes or whatever, sure, but like there's different ways of thinking about them, and I don't have that worked out at all. But
sure. I would just want to ask you a few questions, like if you thought like an omnibenevolent being would desire that there would be no suffering or evil.
Yes.
Yeah. And if it was omniscient, wouldn't it know beforehand all the instances of said suffering and evil?
Yeah.
And then if it's omnipotent, wouldn't it have the power to stop all the suffering and evil?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what kind of where I get at. It's like if it can, then
and it wants
if it's it just seems like it couldn't. This is why I don't believe in the omnis. It couldn't even, to me, logically exist alongside suffering and evil. I mean, if you know the outcome of your design, and then if we are introducing hell, which I know me and you kind of talked, which I think I can take. If someone's like, I believe in annihilation theory or eternal damnation, it's like I'll go off of what they're saying, as opposed to straw manning them into whatever, the argument better or something like that. I'd rather much be aligned with what they believe on it. But if we do take it from that aspect, like the idea of like creating that even place of eternal suffering seems just logically inconsistent with the entire nature of the being.
Right.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I don't think.
So how do you reconcile that then?
Yeah, I have it pretty good. So what I kind of think, and like the more I talk about this and like think about this topic, is leading me closer and closer to universalism. So the idea that like God reconciles all of creation. So I think of like when you think of like the omnis, I don't necessarily hold to classical theism like a Thomistic. I don't know anything about like Aristotelian metaphysics or anything like that, so I'm definitely not like a Thomist. But I think God is like the telos of all of creation. So like the end goal of everything is God. God is just the foundation, is just what everything wants to be. But like the idea of creating something, it introduces evil because I don't think evil is like a thing in and of itself. Like evil is like dark, like the absence of light or whatever. There's no such thing as evil. It's just a lack. Do you agree with that? Is that how you think about evil, or do you think in a different way?
I define just evil as the actions of what would be deliberate harm of well-being.
Yeah, so it's like a lack of doing. I just think of it like a lack of doing good. If
Yeah,
that
but
makes sense.
I think it's worse. It's not just
I
a
would
lack
say
of
it's a
doing good.
Yeah, the intent would have to be captured there more so.
Yeah, I think it's not just a lack of, because you can think of a situation where there's nothing moral taking place, but there's nothing immoral. It's just a what's the word I'm looking for?
Amoral or something.
Yeah, just a amoral space. But that's different than something
Mm.
actually immoral, causing harm, causing suffering, and purposely doing
Yes.
so.
So like evil has some sort of like, yeah, I don't know if I agree. Like there's this like real, I don't know. I don't know exactly where I was getting at. So we could just kind of pass that, or maybe I was down a rabbit trail that I
No,
didn't need to go down. But I just think like creation, like for God to create anything, like he can't create something, another version of himself, because that just, like, I don't think that makes any sense, because God just is the foundation. Like I do believe in some sort of simplicity or something sort of, but I like not really. I don't know. I'm getting too
yeah,
far.
and I
I've
don't
been
want to
like
say like
reading
I
a
can.
lot. Yeah, and you brought up like
Well, I
models
don't want
of
to say
God.
I can
So
put my own
go ahead.
mind into it in the sense of what you would be referring to as, basically that's supersedes any type of intellect I could have. But I think that if the world I designed, when I looked at it, in a blueprint, and I see 1,000 children an hour, 17 a minute, 9 million every year, dying, before they're like 4 or 5 years old. It's like the system seems like that's where we get into that gratuitous kind of suffering aspect of like, did it have to be, if we're going off of plans, like, did it have to be a specific amount of people in the Holocaust? Like, did it have to be that? It couldn't be one number less, like that's always my thing with it, is it seems that the idea of introducing this good or evil builds characters, like, well, at the expense of all these people, it's like, if that's the case, then it would have to be, I feel like it would have to universally be justified in that sense, but it's not, because when I suffer to do a push-up or something like that, lose weight or try to gain muscle, it's just not comparable to the concept of a 1,000 children dying every minute or every hour. I just don't think it's like you can use the those types of arguments. That's where I get lost on it, where it's like it's the kind of the typical quote of, it's either he's unwilling or he's just impotent.
Right.
From my perspective, is where you have to kind of like what the one you would have to drop in that sense. But
that's the contradiction. How can it be all powerful and all loving? That's where the tension lies for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you? So you said you don't. Oh, sorry, pardon.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You can, and then I'll answer.
Oh no, I was just saying, like, so I know you said you didn't have like a specific theodicy or anything like that for it. Not that I would expect anybody to, but like in this, I don't want to get off topic here, but do you think that the idea of or dispensationalism is anything that you would hold to reconcile certain things that, like, because the way I see it is that not only do we have the problem of evil, we have like evil instantiated from the being itself. Like, from my perspective, slavery, Exodus 21, or Leviticus, I think 24.
See, when you get into like slavery and like go ahead. Well, all I want to say about
I was just saying
slavery,
the instantiated aspect of that makes me kind of
like
wonder.
the
It's
fact
like,
that
well,
God told them to do
it feels
it.
like you would have to be in this position of like dispensationalism or covenant theology, where you would have to say like, it's being revealed to us or being dispensed to us why it's the case, or that the law just changes per covenant or per story with whatever man, whether it be the covenant say with Adam or
so you're saying like God. See, this is like where I don't think that, like, I don't understand this part of it or whatever, like why you think this works, and not that it doesn't. I just don't quite, this part I don't understand. So you think like God is like telling people to have slaves in the Old Testament, like he's the reason, like he's actively telling them to have slaves?
Yeah,
and
the
that's
Mosaic law. I mean, it's pretty
yeah.
much handed to Moses. So
No,
yeah,
I
it's pretty
agree.
much
I'm
like
just trying to understand where you're coming
yeah.
from. So
Yeah, if
like
it was more
because
so, if the concept of Moses, if it wasn't just like a specific thing handed to Moses from God, then it wouldn't be. Then I don't think atheists would not. They wouldn't have any ground. You still would say there's some horrible things in there. There's evil, right? But you would be able to kind of say, well, these people didn't understand what the objective, moral standard was. But in this case, God is, he's not only like condoning it, he's establishing it. He's establishing that you can beat a slave, and if they, as long as they get up within 2 days, you're okay, essentially.
yeah, see that part is ridiculous. Like that's just like, do you really think that that's like a good that one? I think just is bad objection or whatever. So like, do you really think that God is saying in the Old Testament like it's okay to like hit your slave just as long as he doesn't die in 2 days?
I do.
Like you don't think there's
I do
any
if,
other
if it was
rules?
true. Well, no,
But you don't
because
think
so like if you were to look at that, like, so like the whole thing is kind of indicative of that, because like you have multiple things in such a short period of time. Like one is the fact that you have him setting up a scenario where the master essentially gets to provide the slave with a wife, and if he has a kid with the wife, the kid belongs to the master,
Yeah.
and so does the wife.
I
And
see
the
what
only
you're
way
Go ahead.
the incentive essentially is, well, how do you keep them forever? Well, you say if you want your wife and kid, then you pierce his ear with an owl at the doorpost in front of God, and he becomes yours forever. And so, relevant to your question, I do think that's the case, because he's in such a short period of time. He's saying the women don't get to go free as the men do. He is already imposing will on people. There's already evil acts, several fold over before you get to that verse. So I guess that's
Spartan,
why I would say. Yeah.
it depends on what you think the Bible is.
Yeah, exactly. I want to say one thing about like directly to what Mike was saying, and then you can go because I'll forget what I want to say.
Sure. Yeah. Definitely.
But,
Definitely.
But the big issue I see with what you're saying, Mike, is that you're reading the law like it's a prescriptive like thing that like God told Moses, like this is how you should do it. Like read this. When in all reality, like the law is case law, more like case law than it is like a prescriptive law. Like it's looking back at this event and like writing and like describing an event and like saying, just like case law, just like Roe v. Wade or whatever. Like they look at this case and then they can use that case to judge a different case. And that's what.
Yeah, but even if that was the case, doesn't it seem like it's still introducing these aspects of evil by his own word?
Oh,
like
yeah,
it could be
not,
easily said that he could easily have said the women get to go free like the men do. I mean, it would be that easy. It would, and if you flip a few pages over, I mean, he could just instantiate instead of no gods before me, he could just say no one own anybody as property, and then that would take care of the entire problem right away.
But also, what you just said, even if that was the case, it doesn't resolve the problem, because even if somehow he wasn't saying that slavery should be supported in all cases, well, he's saying that it should be supported in that case, which is still, whether it's 1 or 1,000,000, it's still the wrong. Now, if you want to take the position that the Bible, maybe was in some ways inspired by God, but isn't the perfect word of God, and instead it's translated through humans and therefore capable of error, and we have to look at the historical and cultural context of these things and the way that it shaped. Okay, fair enough. But that's not how Christians tend to argue when describing the Bible. If you're telling me that the Bible is the word of God, not only that, but the infallible word of God, well then, yes, he's giving us directions as to what it is that he wants and expects. So if that's the case, if that is the interpretation, again, for me, I don't care, but I'm arguing for whatever interpretation is being brought to my attention. If that's the interpretation, then you can't say that God isn't supporting these things, because even in the passages where he's denouncing them, and there are some, there's also ones where he's clearly supporting it. So it's a contradictory text from that reading. So do I think that an all-loving God would support slavery? No, I don't. But that's why the problem that's why there is a problem, because the definitions are not matching up with the scripture and the reality.
Yeah, I think your point about like the way you think about the Bible is very good. That's for sure, because you're right. Like the way a lot of Christians argue these passages, yeah, you're right. Like what I'm saying, like wouldn't be like special pleading or something if I had thought about the Bible the same way they do, but I don't. Like I take your view that you're kind of saying, like, we got to look at the cultural context, and like it is mediated through humans, and like the world was a messed up place, and there could be parts of the Bible where they were justifying what they were doing or something, and like tried to write God's name on it, essentially. You know what I mean? Like God said to do this, so we should do it. And I don't necessarily like that. You know what I mean? Like I don't think, if God for sure, like clearly, like we knew for a fact that Paul was saying you have to read the Bible this way, and like that way led to God directly saying you should have slaves and you can beat them, and if they get up in 2 days they're fine. Then I agree with you. Then like, yeah, I just don't think that's what the Bible is, and that's what like I was kind of trying to get at, like with case law and stuff. Like I think it's more of, here's a description of a really, really messed up situation, and here you go, learn something from it. And I don't know what you're necessarily supposed to learn from it, and that's why the rabbis and like the ancient Israelites and Jewish people, like they just read the Bible and over and over and over and over, and they memorize the entire thing, and that's all they think about and stuff, because they like realize that this story like says this one thing that like God wanted to communicate or whatever. You know, like does that make any sense? It's like I think it's much more complicated than just you should have slaves and you can beat them.
And I think that your view of what Scripture is a more sophisticated one, all things considered.
Yeah, I agree. Because I would have agreed with the other way, but I've been learning more, and I think that like is a childish way to think about it.
But the problem, and what you got to recognize, is that you're a minority in that context, and again, but even in that context, it's like, okay, so the problem remains that God could have stopped this misinterpretation of what he wanted out of existence, and chooses not to. So the problem even remains regardless. But if you want to interpret the Bible in that way, I'm definitely on your side in that. I think that makes more sense. It's just that the majority don't look at it that way. The majority spend and waste their time claiming that you can have objective morality outside religion, and then trying to excuse horrible behavior and horrible immoral things, and making excuses for slavery, making excuses for genocide.
For sure. I mean, I just watched a William Lane Craig debate, and he's like using like 17th century British like legal fiction or something, which was like developed, like I said, in the 17th century AD in Britain, and like using that to describe the atonement. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Like it doesn't make any sense. You can't like they're just like, and that's what a lot of Christians do with all these. They're like, oh, it's based on this and this, and like we're gonna it's okay or whatever. And that's not at all what the authors were talking about. The
same people arguing, the same religious people who argue for objective moral truths in the context of religion, then immediately turn into moral relativists when you bring them the clear problems and flaws of the Bible. You can't have it both ways.
This is where we agreed on my channel for sure. I remember this now. Like we totally agree here that like to say that you need the Bible to ground objective morality, but then it's subjective at that point. It can't be. You cannot get objective morality out of a text. You have to interpret like that. Exactly. It's ridiculous. I agree. If that's what you were trying to say, I think it was. I wasn't trying to like put words in your mouth.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I know somewhere before. Yeah, Mike, help us out. We're
Yeah, no.
I'm good at
it was something weird that happened during that. We have the problem of StreamYard, which is like the problem of weird things happening, because at one point when we were talking, there was another box that popped up that said Mike that was completely black. So I
thought it was Pasta Mike or something.
I was like, yeah, right. I was like, what was that? And it went away. But that stream, it's a little strange.
Maybe it was God.
oh,
Yeah, maybe.
yeah, I was like, maybe it was God peeking. I'm like, you talk. Yeah,
And his name is Mike.
all right. But so the reason why I guess I bring up the dispensationalism or covenant theology, and if anyone's not really familiar, it's more of like this theological idea that dispensationalism is that God's dispensing these kind of laws or ways that he would want humans to interact and be based on. You could take biblical slavery, anything like that, and why it was okay. And it almost seems to me like a problem to avoid, like moral relativism in some senses. And then covenant theology is that there's different covenants for different times for different people throughout the Bible, whether it be like covenant with Adam or so on and so forth, with just different time periods in that. And the reason why I think that would be important to highlight is kind of what Cease would say is that you seem to be at least consistent in that element, because it does seem that people turn into this kind of relativist what was okay then, or God was doing it to for X, Y, and Z reasons. It's like, well, if he is good, whichever horn you're going to take in the Euthyphro, but if you're going to say he is good, that's what goodness is his nature. It's like, well, there's definitely that conflict, that is the reason why I don't believe in any omni God for a lot of those reasons. Is that for me it's like logically inconsistent or even contradictory. Like, what would you think about that? Do you think that taking a position on seeing those omnis and concluding that it's more probabilistically true that God doesn't exist, how do you take that? Would you say that's like naive, or where would you go?
No, I basically would probably like that. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I almost agree with you. I just don't think it's like enough. I think there's other but I do think I could give some evidence again, like towards naturalism. Like, for sure, if I was looking at this objectively and all I was thinking about was the problem of evil, I would say, like, if that's the only thing, then sure, I'm like, I think it works. I just don't. I think like my personal experiences and thinking about like, I just think that. Whatever. Yeah, I don't want to get into I'm not good. I've realized that I'm like horrible at arguing like a broad topic, like actually arguing for God. Or
Yeah, and this is
this
is a hard topic. I mean, so it's like it's
that's
honestly
why
like all the weights put on the theist shoulders, but yeah.
Sorry.
Well, we'll take some questions from anybody. I know I have one already. But if you have any questions, you can ask them directed to Ethan, myself, or Cease. I have one for Cease already. David, off of TikTok. Cease, why is it circular if we live in a reality where God expects us to follow his commands, but not if we apply his same standards to society? Do you want to answer that first? And then do we have free will in society to break or follow laws? So I'll leave that up on the thing.
Why is what circular? If he's talking about why the definition of goodness, it's circular because you're not actually explaining the content of what is meant by goodness. The same, for example, if God came down to earth and said rape is good, okay, according to that framework, then rape would be good because God said so. Now, any person who sort of is connected with reality would recognize that is inherently not good. And so maybe you might want to say that God wouldn't say that because it is not, how would I say this? Wouldn't reflect his character. But I'm trying to think of how I want to put this forth. The difference with laws in society is that we've come together to elect those laws, and we can change the laws. It's a collective approach, at least in our society, ideally. In the context of a God that sets up the rules, that is, if not a tyranny, it's certainly not a context of freedom, because the consequences and the structures which we have to abide by are imposed on us. And it's I don't see where the freedom lies in a situation that we haven't elected ourselves. I don't have a problem.
So he sent he made a comment. He says, I was addressing his comment where he said earlier that a world with free will is circular. I'm not sure if he remembers.
No, I didn't say. I don't think I said that a world with free will is circular. I said that a world with free will is incoherent with what we understand, from what we understand reality to be. I don't see a context in which free will makes sense. The evidence is entirely against it, both in terms of neuroscience and physics and biology and psychology. We don't find where this space where free will exists is found. Again, if anybody has a good argument, I would love to be able to believe in it, but I've not found any convincing argument for it. I think what's circular is that sort of the language games that are played when talking about or trying to define goodness on the side of the theist usually. And my problem is that if there is a God and he subjects us to his will, that goes beyond any notions of justice that we can apply to our society. I'm blanking on the word. At the worst, it's tyranny, and at best, it's a dictatorship, because we haven't elected. We have no say in this development, in what these laws are. They're just imposed upon us, and if we have a problem with that, then the consequences are eternal suffering. I don't see anything moral about that framework.
Yeah. And I know, Spartan, you had that question for Cease. I was out while you guys were talking on that about you said why would atheists care about the problem of evil?
Yeah, kind of like, yeah. I mean, I guess you guys are a little different. You're hold to like objective morality, so that kind of means a little more. But especially someone who holds like a subjective view to morality, would like the whole argument. I kind of just wanted to go over like why the Christians saying by the Frank Turek style, where he like says if you're an atheist and you bring up the problem of evil, you basically prove that God exists, because you prove that objective morality must exist, and the only way for objective morality to exist is if God exists. And I kind of want to talk about why that's so bad, but that's
complete nonsense.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I guess I could see that what he would be trying to do in that aspect, but the mistake is to assume that you would only be able to get more realism out of a being or thinking.
I mean, that is such a philosophically weak approach that it's just tiring to even hear. It's like, okay, why are you talking about something that you haven't read anything about? Because the only way to make that claim is to just not understand the field, to not have any experience with the field. So it's almost like at this point I just dismiss it, because it's like you don't know what you're talking about. But as far as like what you said, David, brought up earlier, from my understanding, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but from my memory, his approach is, well, who are we to challenge what God wants?
Like skeptical theism.
It's like, if God says this, then it automatically is what it should be, and who am I to have a problem with it? Which to me, it doesn't really resolve the problem, because if God came down and said, "I'm God, rape this person," I would say, "Fuck you," and it's what
I don't think God can do that, but
right. Okay, so that's fair. If the approach is that it wouldn't fit in his character, but then you can't tell me that the framework of a God that's created a system of reward and punishment is one that has anything to do with freedom, has anything to do with it's just inconsistent is what I'm saying. Again, it depends on how you define God and how you define the Bible and all those things. But to just say God, just to say it's good because God says it's good, doesn't actually address the content of what is meant
Sure.
by these words.
Yeah, we got a couple more questions. Unless you want to give
I
a response
tweeted
to
about
that,
the stream,
Spartan.
so I got a few people in.
Oh, nice. I appreciate that. Thank you for everybody that's come out. Gio, Sam, Landon, Nick, Quint?
Quint.
I don't want to say that
Quint.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had him on my stream actually twice.
Oh, nice.
We talked about like women in ministry, like women pastors, but
nice. Well, David's got another question. I'm gonna circle around to your question and get these guys in real quick. And I'll answer this. We'll start. I'll go ahead and give a pretty simple thing for me. Divine simplicity, yes, meh, or nah. From my understanding of divine simplicity, it's essentially what he's kind of this idea that he's unlike anything that we are and wouldn't be able to be understood in the ways that we would, attribute to him, but that his attributes are pretty much are him in certain ways that we wouldn't understand. My problem with that, no parts. Yeah. My problem with that is that that's indistinguishable from nothing to me. And at that point, I just don't care because it's
I don't even understand what it is.
Yeah. It's Thomism. Like it's based on like Thomas Aquinas mainly.
A bunch of guys.
I mean, but mainly it's like rooted in
Anselm,
Thomas
Aquinas. Yeah.
Well,
a lot of the A's.
Anselm's a little different. Like Thomas Aquinas disagreed a lot with Anselm, but
what is the content of the concept? Because I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like so the fact that God is not made of any parts. So like God's omniscience is the exact same thing as his omnibenevolence, and it's the same thing as his omnipotence or whatever. Like his everything is the same. There's no parts. Like God just is essentially. Like
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's just it definitely can't like explain it. And I would mainly say meh. Like I sort of hold to it. Like I think it makes a little bit of sense, but I don't see how you can really understand the Trinity and the incarnation and stuff. But
I mean, I'll have to look into it because I actually don't know what is really being said.
Yeah, I'm not the best at explaining it. So
whenever I had first been proposed it, I just thought it was just like a being that was as simple as it possibly could be, and from that point I was like, well, I think something with the least amount of limitations would be the most simple, and thinking being that has intent to create would be more of a limitation than just always existing. And so I think but if that was the definition, it defeats itself. But in this case, I think that defining it in those ways seems almost indistinguishable from nothing to me, and it has no real value to me in a world where I pretty much have to go off of these conceptual or empirical forms of knowledge.
I will add one thing, that I think any kind of speculation on the metaphysical, I think immediately I lose interest, because I at the end of the day,
because you're not claiming certainty in the. Yeah.
No, I mean, forget certainty, but there's no reason to take any one of these interpretations seriously. Like, what is the evidence for these things? Well, people will say, well, you can't provide evidence for the metaphysical. Well, then what are you doing? It's like,
exactly.
At that point, it's like, I'm just not. I want to know. I want to try to get the closest I can to understanding reality. And if there's some sort of metaphysical space,
you have.
Sorry, what?
You just have this weird area where you can come up with an infinite amount of these metaphysical claims, and then go look at any New Age hippie, and look at all their metaphysical claims with crystals and powers and vibrations and all this stuff. It's like I always go back to underdetermination and how you can't show a future testable prediction. It just seems imaginary, and you have to separate why your idea isn't just simply an idea. You know what I mean?
And if there is such a thing, some kind of other plane of existence, we can't access it. We can't know about it. We can't talk about it. It's just not. I don't know. It's just not interesting to me.
Yeah, that's fair.
We got a couple more questions to go through. Let's keep this one a little quicker. I think it tacks on to David's last question to you. We subject others to laws we create. Do they have a right to say the laws are unfair?
Certainly. And that's what we've seen, that historically is that things that were legal at one point were still immoral. And that's, the whole civil rights movement is a testament to that, and laws change, and laws
doing
should
right
be
now.
changed.
That's what I was about to say.
Exactly.
There's plenty of laws right now that I think people are 100% justified in claiming that they're unfair.
Yeah, and to just say, they're fair because they were put by those in power. And maybe he's not saying that, but, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but
Sure.
that's sort of the impression that I get from some of the conversations I've had with him, is that ultimately, if God exists, he's the one that makes the rules. And to me, it's like, I don't care what, it's all about power to me.
Yeah, so I use the guy in the room argument. So there's a guy in the room, or I'm sorry, I'm in a room, and there's people in the room, and I go do something, and they go, hey, you can't do that. And I go, well, why can't I do that? And they said, the guy who created the room doesn't allow you to do that. And I look around, and I don't see anybody that created the room. I don't even have evidence to suggest that the room was created by this guy. I don't even know if it was created by a person. But I'm told that I can't do this because the guy in the room says, well, I don't care. If the guy in the room if I have no reason to think the guy in the room exists, then I have no reason to think that I should follow the rules or give a shit about the rules, about what people are telling me about the guy who created the room. It's just, to me, it's like you could say it was a horse that created the room, and you have to follow that. It's like you could just come up with an infinite amount of things, and the room could have just been there by a natural process for all I know. And that,
but to me, it's worse than that.
Yeah.
But I think it's worse than that, because I think even if we knew that the guy in the room existed, what does the just,
Oh yeah, that's actually what I was gonna. Yeah.
Right. It's not.
Oh, sorry,
what does that have to do? Well, no, sorry. I was just gonna say, what does that have to do? I mean, let's say that I believe in God and He created all things. It doesn't make him moral to then say, I've decided that slavery is okay, or I've decided that even things I might find to be moral, they wouldn't be moral because an authority figure said so. There has to be something deeper for me to value that thing as moral or immoral. It can't just be because that which is in power has said that it is.
Yeah.
Any things from you, Spartan, on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. So, like, the whole idea of, like, it's only moral because God says it, or, like, yeah, I disagree with that. I think, like, the way I think more about, like, God's relation to, like, what is right or whatever, like, when you're trying to, like, use this room analogy a little bit, and it's more like God built the room, like, with the intention, like, that you should use the door to go in and out, and, like, you have to do that, you know what I mean? Like, you can't just teleport through the wall. Like, does that make sense? Like, it's not necessarily, like, what you should do, but, like, the way the world is set up by the person who built the room.
Well, I think there's a difference between the fundamental reality of how things operate and how you kind of navigate through it versus
and that's what I think God's relation
what is. Well, yeah, what is, a sin, or, these concepts that someone's telling you you can't do that because you'll end up below the room in this, fiery place. It's like, if it's in conflict, what I think is moral, kind of what Cease is going, even if the guy in the room exists, I don't care about the guy's rules, because it just fundamentally isn't. It's not a deep enough meaning. It's not. There's nothing there for me to have substance of why I should actually care. Especially when in the context of what we're talking about, they introduce this idea of being deceived. And it's like, well, now you set yourself up where, how do I not know it's the thing in your story that's part of the deception being Satan or something? That's just, to me, it creates all these problems that I could just keep, and they might sound nonsensical to somebody, but I try to draw the parallel that that's to me the same kind of just imaginary idea. It might not be, but you have to actually you'd have to demonstrate why it's not simply just an idea at that point. But, so we have, would we have free will if we had a soul or something outside of our bodies? You guys can.
I mean, I don't even know what the definition of soul would be, and how that whatever would exist outside the body, how that would somehow escape the causal chain of phenomenological events. I don't know what that would look like. I mean, I don't know. I don't see how that would make sense.
Yeah, I'm not too sure where I land on like a philosophy of free will at all. Like it's, I think free will, like
Sure.
I think it's one of the most complicated things to start thinking about. And like you're right, like I think it's very hard to like posit like an actual like this is where the free will is or whatever. And I'm more of like a hylomorphic dualist or whatever, so I don't necessarily think like we have a separate substance like a soul. I think it's more of like a emergent
Oh.
property, but I'm not exactly sure. Yeah.
Well, that leads us into actually the next question pretty smoothly, which is dualist or physicalist when it comes to human anthropology.
Yeah, and I've learned that there's actually like Christian physicalists. So that's like
the human anthropology part, to me, the clarification on that seems to be like, I think I know what he's saying, but I would just say it in that just typically what a dualist or a physicalist would be in any aspect. I mean, I pretty much relate that down to as a physicalist, I reduce that down to the brain, but
I mean, you could be a dualist and think that like two different cars exist or something.
I don't know what he means by the question. I mean, I'm a physicalist. I'm my label, which I don't like to give labels, but I would be a non-reductive physicalist. So I do think everything is one thing, and I think everything is physical. But I think there are some linguistic limitations to our ability to reduce phenomena to purely physical descriptions. Not because there is some other area, but because it's I think I've talked about this on the show before. But I don't know what he means in the context of anthropology. Like what?
Just relating to like how humans are made or whatever. Like it's more. I've seen this word more in Christian things or whatever. You're right, because like when I like secular kind of more anthropology more relates to like evolution or like history of humanity or whatever like that 100,000 years ago is what I more think about. But he's just referring to like what a human is made out of, science of human.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, a physicalist all the way.
Yeah, and I think I'm
I'm a physicalist as well.
Dualist.
Yeah, I'm a physicalist as well. I actually am. I'm pretty far down the rabbit hole of that. You can reduce it down to the physical. I think that I potentially could be on the same side of C, so that that may not be achievable due to like linguistics. If you would label me the same thing as a non-reductivist in the same way you put it, maybe that'd be the same. I guess as far as our limitations of getting there, I don't know. I just do think that it is strictly physical, and that in theory, like if we had the capability, then we would be able to reduce that. But I don't know. It's more along the lines to me of just the overall question is pretty simple to me, because you take a bat to somebody's head, it alters the way that they think. You just schizophrenia, any of these types of mental diseases that happen. I mean, the way that one's qualia is changed is in every aspect we can see in an fMRI and a brain state. So I don't see that. I can't see any lended credibility to idealism or dualism from my perspective.
That's what I was about to say. Are either you like sympathetic to idealism at all, or
no? I like it's one of the ones where I'm just like it's like someone telling me that if I show them a CD, right? Like it's like them saying the songs on the CD
are actually what's real.
They're like immaterial, but not understanding that it's actually physically on the CD.
Right.
Like it's actually a physical component of the CD. All information is physical.
Yeah.
All information in physics, all information is physical.
Yeah, like idealism to me sounds like you're saying with the CD, and they're saying like the beat of the song is like the real part of it, and like the plastic. Well, it's like
if you crack open the CD, it's like
properties. It's like
it's like you crack open the CD. World. Are you gonna see music and notes fall out? Well, no, I'm not, because it's just not understanding how that works as the medium for the music. So, it's not the greatest analogy. I mean, I know in
No,
all
I actually
analogies, that's
no,
the
I
way it
actually
works,
think
but
that's a really good one. Actually,
Yeah, I do
think-
too.
Right.
Like, cause that's like idealism is kind of like saying like the information on a hard drive is the real part, not the hard drive itself, and that's
yeah, and as
weird.
somebody who's a computer programming major, it's like when you're learning about these things, it's like to imagine that it's immaterial in any way. It's like, and how would you think these things work? I mean, it has to be physical in some way. I mean, for it to manifest in our physical reality. You know, it's just. But anyway, all right. So we have another question. I got like 2 more after this. If God can't do something in the case of God commanding rape, would that mean that he doesn't have free will, or wouldn't be all powerful? So
I think our understanding of free will in the sense like free will is like I think a lot of ways we understand free will like the more options you have like the more free you are, but I just don't think that's like what free will is. And I think like God, the ultimate free will is being able to choose the best option every single time, and that's what God has. So like he doesn't have free will in the sense that he has like a bunch of choices he can make, but he can make the very best choice with all the required knowledge every single time, and that's what freedom is. That's what we want when we talk about freedom. Not just we don't want just a bunch of options. That's not really freedom. You can add options, but you're not any more free.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to reply to that. I think I struggle to see where the component of freedom. I mean, one.
Well, so what he's saying is, if God is given this, predicament of being able to say, Caesar saying, if he came down and said rape was okay, like you said earlier, and is replying saying, well, he wouldn't do that, right? It's not part of his nature in that sense. He's basically now saying he can't do that, right? So
yeah, it depends.
Now
It
that's
depends on
left the
how
option
you
of.
Yeah, it
Now
depends
it's
on how you
option of-
define all powerful. It depends on how you
Sure.
define all powerful. If by all powerful you mean, all, to be able to do any, having all options available, then, but some might define it as sort of encompassing your own nature to the highest degree. So changing your mind from one definition might be seen as something would be within the definition of being all powerful and not being a positive thing, and from somebody else's definition it might be actually a detriment. Like if you're capable of changing your mind, it means that you made a mistake previously. So I think it depends on. This is the problem with some of these type of things, is that the terms are never really well defined. And so I'm never certain what. There's a lot of baggage to these words, and I'm never certain what is actually being said.
Yeah, I
fair
totally
enough.
agree. Yeah, we can move on.
Oh no, sorry, bud. I think there's a delay
No.
on my end to yours.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, I think I would basically agree with what C said. Yeah, there was like one point I wanted to add in, but whatever. I lost my train of thought.
No worries. Real quick,
have
Axioms on trial. Question for Ethan: is Christianity inclusive or exclusionary to all people?
And they like cleared up with like some people even or whatever. And I think it's inclusive of all people. I'm like pretty like I don't know if I mentioned or not or it was before, but I'm like pretty close to being convinced that universalism is true, like universal reconciliation. So God will reconcile all of creation, all people in the end. So I definitely think it's inclusive to all people. I don't believe in hell. So.
All right. One thing, shout out to Cease there, was good job, guys. Hello, Cease from his nephew, and his username is Begin to Know.
Oh. Hey, that's great.
I would say that's
I wanted to
guess.
that up there.
Yeah. Hey guys,
I like that.
Yeah, that's great.
He's a friend in my book just for that. That's funny. And last question. Oh no, wait. Sorry, I skipped Pasta Mike. Sorry, guys. Pastor Mike.
Oh yeah.
Hey
I saw this
folks,
one and
Sparta.
it's a good one.
What would be the best reason to knock your confidence? Well, let me read it like him. Sparta, what would be the best reason to knock your confidence in Christianity?
Nice. That was good. Yeah,
That's pretty good, right? It's pretty
Yeah,
That's
that
pretty
was
good,
pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, this is a tough one. Like I said, I think the problem of evil is like the strongest argument, and I do think like there's a lot of force behind it. So it would probably be something to do with the problem of evil, but I don't know what would have to necessarily change to like for it to like actually convince me that Christianity is not true. But then again, like if he's really just asking like what would knock my confidence in Christianity, I think I like if I learn something about like I think I could be convinced of like Islam or something like that before I would be convinced of like atheism. But so some argument for like that Judaism or Islam or something like that was true would maybe be the thing that would convince me that Christianity is not true, but I don't see that happening. But
Sure. Appreciate the question and answer there. Now we got. I was gonna do the last one, but I love GeoSam, so he gets another question. So, and we'll end it on. We'll conclude on this. Given the Christian God claims, how do Christians determine what is real about the world and what isn't?
does he say I'm real about the world or word like the Bible?
Yeah, like because I think what he's trying to contrast here is, hopefully I do a good job at steel manning what he's saying. If there's things within the Bible that we don't see, whether it be like just take the walk on water is always a go-to, like things that typically you wouldn't see in reality, raising people from the dead, whether it be Lazarus or Jesus, all those kind of things. So how would you determine what is real and what isn't? That's how I guess I take that question, is given the other claims in the book.
I don't like. Are you? Yeah, like as far that's. I mean, I think it's an interesting question. Like, how do we think about like individual miracle claims, like in the Gospels or whatever? That I don't know how you really like. I mean, at first it comes down to like how important is this to anything or whatever. Like the whole idea of like Jesus didn't actually walk on water or not. Like if we don't have or not if he didn't. Yeah, I don't know. Like because we can't. I don't really think the historical method is gonna tell us if Jesus actually like fed 5,000 people with 5 fish or not. Like that doesn't seem possible. There's no way history could convince me that didn't happen. I mean, I think that would be weird to somebody to make like a claim like that, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know exactly how to determine. I think we look at Jesus as our ultimate example and that's how we know what's true, but I don't know exactly how to answer his question. And hello, Craig Reed. You joined right at the very end. I can't hear anybody now. I thought that's why I'm talking over everyone.
I think Mike is muted. Mike, you're muted for some reason.
I'm on two. I have StreamYard up on 2 computers, and so one is so that it doesn't look like I'm looking above my camera like this, and here, and then I can also do things. It's just easier for me. But sometimes I'll look at it and see it's unmuted on one or muted. Okay. And yeah, and that's how I realized when that black screen came up with my name on it. That's where that came from. But anyway,
I have. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm just gonna.
No. I was just gonna say something dumb. I was basically saying that my camera was like kind of covering up your face, so when I saw that you were muted, I assumed I was talking for like 5 minutes, like over you or something. I didn't really know.
No, you're good. But yeah, no, I think that's very productive. We hit about that 1:30 mark. We usually try to do about an hour to an hour and 30 minutes. If there's anything that you guys want to chime in before I do a little outro here, then go ahead.
The last thing I'll say, and I'm sure that we'll talk about this again in the future, is that I think anybody who thinks that history has something to say about the supernatural or doesn't understand the field, you can't. By definition, in principle, you can't do that. Doesn't mean that doesn't mean that the supernatural event certainly didn't happen. But we can't. History tries to give us the most plausible explanation for what happened in the past. By definition, a miracle is the least plausible. It's even worse than that. We can't even attribute possibility to it because we never demonstrated it to actually be possible yet. So, anyone who thinks that the resurrection is a historical fact, I think is just completely confused.
I think even another way to say what you're saying, like, not only is like the supernatural claim like the least likely, but if you're just willing to grant that supernatural things can happen, then it's even more likely that like a million gods raised Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, you could just posit anything you want.
Right, at that point. Like, I didn't think of that, actually. That's interesting. Yeah.
I think it just opens the floodgates, and you could just say, well, actually, it's more likely that an evil demon came down and convinced you that this happened and, like, planted all this evidence in your head. So, actually,
I never thought about it that way.
No,
no,
it makes sense, but I mean,
point you to a video. One of my friends.
Go ahead,
I'm saying this one thing. We're like lagging a tiny bit.
Me and you have really bad delay. It's like me and Cease are fine, but me and you have really bad delay.
I know, so we both have to like sometimes power through. But I would just want to say that I have a friend with the New Testament Review podcast, and they've been putting out some more videos. And he's a Christian who put out a video like defending what I was saying and what Cease was saying about methodological naturalism and the resurrection, and it's pretty interesting. So,
yeah, and I mean, that's that kind of underdetermination thing that I say, and you have a good point. Like, once you open up the supernatural thing, it's like, well, now you don't even really need evidence from any perspective at all. You can just rival any conclusion with it, and I get that, and it's not a defeater of it to say, well, obviously it's not true, which is why we don't make the claims of certainty to say, well, this isn't an actual. It's not to say that this can't happen, depending on what the contradictions, I guess, that would be involved. But yeah, if it's the least probable by definition, at least for a miracle or something like that, and then we don't have the demonstration. My thing is, if you have any understanding of like inferential statistics, like you kind of understand that it would be a miracle by the kind of Christian standard if we didn't see miracles, right? Or what people call miracles, like these just statistical anomalies, because that's what you see with things that are chance or inferential statistics. It's like where there's going to be, and I do this in sports, how I make money with NFL, like DraftKings and stuff, is where you expect there not to be certain stats or things happen, it's going to happen eventually, given it's not, physically impossible. It's not that it's a miracle or by any means. It's just that it's just statistically going to happen at some point. If these things did not happen, I think that would probably be more miraculous to see that we don't see those things happen. But yeah, so that was a good show, guys. I appreciate it. If you guys didn't know already or haven't read the bottom of the screen, October 3rd, we Matt Slick and Cease. We'll have a conversation about worldviews. I'm going to talk to him tomorrow and narrow it down a little better and get the time. And I'll update the time for the YouTube video that's already set up. So please definitely join that one. What was that?
I didn't realize it's in 2 days.
Yeah, 2 days. Yeah, unless he did tell me on the phone. He did tell me, I think, on the phone. He said if he had to push it back, he'd let me know, but he said he'd do it for sure. So he's definitely coming on. But the date that he's got on the calendar and we got on the calendar is the 3rd. So hopefully you guys stay tuned for that if you enjoy that. And yeah, we appreciate it. Geo Sam, Cease's nephew, Craig,
you guys,
Amiga Nuts.
Sign off, I'm sure either one of you guys, if you wanted to go on Craig's channel, he's good. Like, he's really cool, and he just has like random conversations all the time. So definitely, I'm sure he'd have you.
Yeah, we would love that.
Yeah,
that'd be amazing. Yeah, and that said, guys, if you haven't already, go subscribe to Spartan's channel. Get him up to that 200. I think he's at 185 right now. I think he's like 100 exactly above us. I think we're at 85. I think that's why I remembered it. But anyway, so yeah, go subscribe to him, guys. We really appreciate it. Much love to everybody. Please be safe out there. And last thing I can say to be real to everybody is wear your seatbelts and just please don't be an idiot on the road. So.